Hey, good morning, everybody. I am back. It's Robert Phoenix, uh, and it's 9:23, and it's actually 9:20 as far as the time goes. Here in the lovely Hill Country, there is Wendy Quintana. Hello, Wendy. Good to see you. It is Wednesday morning. That's right. Hello. It is Wednesday morning, and it is the 23rd of September. And I want to thank everybody for all the kind birthday wishes that came through on the channel yesterday. It was an interesting day, to say the least. I'll have more on my day tomorrow, as the events of yesterday will still continue to unfold, and I will keep you posted of some rather interesting developments. There's Ryan. What's going on? Glenn Miller. What's happening? Let's see. PB in the house. Good morning. There's little Susie. Susie the Sea Dragon is back. Welcome, Sue. There's Judy Anderson, Donika Rose, Christy Tesmer, Joe Mama, Shirley Losciavo in the house. Marie, hey, good to see you. Lils is here. Let's see who else. Getting the yo. There's Tea Time with Tessia, TWT, FOP77. Morning. Good morning to you. Oswald Spangler, 2020, 666, 3.033030333. Connecting the dots, breaking down the mathematics. JMP Love, what's going on? There we go. This is a great place. This is a true autonomous zone for people to hang out and, congregate. Right? Let's see, who else we have? There's Frank Bry. What's going on, Frank? Charles Mazek. Good morning, Phoenix. Disturbing news from suspicious of foreigner whales beach themselves right over the present position of the southern pole. Yeah, that's not good. It's not good. This happens periodically. You'll have, whether it's whales or dolphins, you'll have these beachings from time to time, and they're hard to kind of wrap your head around. And as a human, you have any kind of, let me turn this light down just a little bit. You have any kind of appreciation for these marvelous beings. It is, it's like it's hard to sort of fathom. Pun not intended. They are the record keepers. The cetaceans are the ancient record keepers of this planet, and their presence in our oceans is vitally important. And I don't know if you've ever had any up close and personal kind of sort of connection with a whale. It is like kind of mind blowing. And there was one day when I used to live in California in a town called Montera, and I lived literally like 3 blocks from the beach, and I would run on the beach quite a bit. That was my thing. And one day I was down there. I think it might have been, God, I think it was like Thanksgiving or Easter. It was one of those days where there were a lot of people on the beach, but it wasn't like a sunny beach day. But because it was a holiday, people were there, and so if you've ever been to Montera State Beach, it almost is sort of like the coves on the coast are almost like half moons, which is why Half Moon Bay is called Half Moon Bay, because it has the shape of a half moon, right? So the same thing exists in Montera, just a bit north. And Montera Beach has the best sand, by the way, of any of the beaches in that area. That big, sort of not too big, but sort of coarse, pebbly sand, but not too big and too coarse. It's perfect for running. It's great. It's not that really thin sort of sand that gets all muddy on your feet. This is a great beach. So I was down there one day. I think it might have been Thanksgiving or Easter, and all of a sudden, in this little cove area, 2 whales show up, and they start breaching the water and, coming down and splashing, and nobody knew this was coming. It was just one of those moments. It's like, wow. Wow. It was like a wow moment. There was, I think, a mother and her calf. And that's about as close to a whale as I got, but pretty close. And just, sort of, when you have those moments in nature and they just, address themselves, it's pretty cool. And they were there for less than 5 minutes, but they were definitely making their presence known. And it was awesome. We see a lot of seals in that area. They'd come in and poke their heads up, and they're interesting. They're interesting creatures, the seals. One time I was surfing in Santa Cruz, and that was this weird moment, right? This is like when Jaws is happening, the movie Jaws. So I'm paddling out, and all of a sudden, these bubbles come up next to my surfboard. I'm like, what is going on here? And all of a sudden, this seal pops up and looks me right in the face and blows water out of his nose. He kind of goes like this with me, checking me out. As soon as like the thing happened, I got on I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, whew. Then all of a sudden he popped up on the other side and like did it again. So I kind of miss that stuff with the beaches in California. Pretty cool places. Miranda Couch is here. Hello. Ryan's had many dolphin experiences. Half Moon Bay, like the Sunshine Coast in BC, possibly. I worked for Dr. John Ford. He studied language. Let's see. I know whales. I work doing whale. Cool. Help deliver a calf. Wow. That is awesome. Much needed rain on the way. Good. There's Amanda Palmender. Did I celebrate yesterday more than usual? No, I didn't, actually. I'll have a story about yesterday, but I won't have that story till tomorrow. The Crimmies are here. Oh, there's Jasper. What's going on, buddy? Jasper has not been feeling well, but looks like he's making a bit of a rebound as he gets up. Hey, what's going on, buddy? Good to see you. He had some, Jasper likes raw meat. And I gave him some raw meat the other day, which didn't sit too well with him. And he's been, I think, sort of detoxing. Hey, you want to come over and say hi to everybody? So he's been kind of down for the count, but looks like he's making a rebound, which is great. It's great to see him here. Let's see what else is going on. There's Faith and their RV trip. Hi, Faith. And we got Steve Mercer, Michael, John G. I did seal rescue. Seals are great, man. Seals are great. There's got to be a connection between seals and dogs. There's got to be, because I used to have this black lab golden retriever border collie mix. Great dog. And when we would run on the beach, that's when every now and then a seal would come in, and they have very dog-like energy, seals. Very, very dog-like energy. There's got to be a connection there somewhere. Like at some point, there was like a dog breed that decided, hey, we don't want any part of this land thing, and decided, or who knows how that happened. Stephen Anderson in the house. Let's see, who else do we have? Song. Okay, they bark. Yeah, they do bark. Yes, they do bark. Let's Hurricane Teddy arriving on our island. Let's see, Steamers Lane. That's it. You know where it's at. That's it. That's where I used to surf. Steamers Lane. It was a good learning experience, and I think. Well, I'm not going to get into that story. I can't wait to leave California. It's really gone downhill, sadly. Yes. We were going to buy a house in Montera. Ex-husband had disagreement with builder. Sale fell through. More synchronicity. Well, it's interesting because my parents did build a house in Montera, and they did work with a builder, and the builder was okay. It was the people who were granting the permits who were not okay. Those guys were not okay. Let's see. What else do we have? Laura does a great. Oh, good. Good. We can't wait to see Laura's seal impression when she gets here, Emily. The last gasp of summer this week in Chicago. We'll enjoy them while you can. There's the man. Come on over here. All right, making a rebound. Making a rebound. There he is. Oh, there he is, the Jasper man. There he is. Yeah, good. Nice to see you. Good to have you back. Maybe I'll get to save $200 on the vet trip. Let's see. What else do we have here? Hurricane Teddy wasn't as bad as last year's hurricane. I had to put my dog to sleep. Now it's like, oh boy. Now it's like the universe is up shoving into my face. Dog videos, people wearing dog shirts, dogs. Isn't that weird how that happens? Isn't that weird how that happens? That is so weird when that happens. When I had to put my dog down, he was really a very interesting character. You know, he was old, and every time, I don't know if you experienced this, Jacqueline, but every time it was getting close to putting him down, he would like rebound. And he'd have like a good day or two where it's like, oh wow, like he knew, like, man, I gotta like summon the forces here. And I must have gone through that with him at least 3 or 4 times. It's like, oh geez, well, he's making a bit of a rebound, but and then at one point that was it. I had to take him to the vet and put him. That was hard, very hard day. Let's see. Yeah, so it's I totally relate to that. They're like part of our family. You know, the whole thing with pets is just we get so attached to them, and they give us such a great unconditional love and support. So yeah, well, I'm sure at some point another one of God's creatures will find their way into your life. A lot of people don't like to have another pet, though, after they lose a pet. It's like they're done. I can't go through it, right? They just like can't go through it. And so, you know, different strokes for different folks. But you never know. You know, the old universe will kind of step in sometimes and present somebody or a little something, right? So just be open to that if that's the case. Let's see. Anybody else? There's Victoria V. And let's see. Getting massive rain in Arkansas from the hurricane. Good. Well, Jasper's nose is wet and cold. I think that's a good sign. I think it's a good sign. He's just going to hang out with me. The Jasper man. Got a lot to cover today. So let's just jump right into this thing. Let's do a little prayer and a little invocation. And, you know, I really want to, there's a lot of people in pain right now. And I'm not even talking about physical pain, although there's that, but there's a lot of people that are in psychological pain, deep psychological pain. And, I just want to hold some space for these people because in many instances they turn their psychological pain into something that is not necessarily on the surface worthy of empathy or compassion, and they turn their psychological pain into sort of, how should I say this, disassociative perpetration. So, you know, and we got to account for those people because I'm going to talk about that today. Here we go. Dear blessed and holy Father, Mother God of the great central sun within the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Son of Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best information and truth come through this channel at this time, and that we all bless and grace with the qualities of compassion and empathy, flexibility, humor, courage, strength, commitment, fortitude, intelligence, humor, a double shot of humor, wisdom, perspective, detachment, discernment, And above all, love, we ask that any karmic residue becomes purified and clarified, removed from this stream. So be it. All right, let's get going. So big news out of Australia. And I'm going to focus mainly on what's going on in Australia, and I'm going to show you some very interesting connections as it relates to Australia specifically, but also what's now getting ready to take place. Now, Masaki sent me a text yesterday about how apparently Dan Andrews is going to allow people, citizens, to arrest other people in Australia. Well, this should be interesting. So I'm going to show you the story because we have to back this up. And by the way, I'm not impersonating a news person by any stretch of the imagination. So here we go. Mail Online, Daniel Andrews demands extraordinary new law to let Victorians arrest each other. As top judges warn of abuse, and critics say he's creating his own version of the East German police state, secret police. The Omnibus Emergency Measures Bill would let government authorize various officials to make arrests, would also allow officials to arrest people they suspect may spread coronavirus as lockdown protesters. A group of 14 retired judges and barristers have written a letter slamming the drastic plan as open to abuse. Critics say Mr. Andrews wants to create his own version of the Stasi, secret German, East German secret police force. There you go. There you go, Australia. There's your protectors. They just have your best interests at heart. They just want to make sure that you stay healthy. This guy creeps me out a little bit. Like you could kind of see the cross-eyed look going on there. He's kind of freaky, right? That's a freaky guy. They're all kind of freaky, right? Because when you have a mask on, it's dehumanizing. It's completely dehumanizing. It takes away the humanity, right? This guy could be an alien, by the way. Looks like an alien. This is completely dehumanizing. This is what they're doing, right? So here we go. Come and take it. Come and take it. I'm not sure what this is about. The bill would allow government to let protective service officers and work-safe inspectors enforce public health directions such as Melbourne's 9 p.m. curfew, gathering limits, pictured anti-lockdown protesters. I guess that they're doing their best to make a stand. And here we go. Look, this thing is just so Orwellian. It is so freaking Orwellian. He's got his video camera, not just the chest cam, which they all have now, but the video camera. They've got the eye covering. I mean, just all traces of humanity have been removed. The ability to smell, right? The ability to talk and see their actual lips move, the ability to touch. They're all pretty much wearing comms, right? He's wearing a comm. So now the ability to hear has also been impeded, and sight has been mediated. So they are cut off from almost the entirety of their human experience. The only thing they have that's really, allowing them to relate to the rest of humanity is their neck. The unprecedented plan, which is being debated in Victorian Parliament, would also allow officials to arrest people they may suspect spread coronavirus even if they have done nothing wrong. They want to put people apparently into camps. They want to put conspiracy theorists into camps. Those who would be arrested include positive patients or close contacts who officials say may refuse to self-isolate, such as protesters or people with mental health difficulties. So now we've actually they've spread the net out and made it wider. You don't even have to have coronavirus, right? So you can be a protester or people. So they're lumping the two together, the protesters and the people with mental health difficulties. So if you're a protester, they're saying you probably have a mental health difficulty. An esteemed group of 14 retired judges and barristers, they wrote a letter. What do you think Dan Andrews will say about that? This is what he'll say. He's taking his orders from Beijing at this point. Critics say Mr. Andrews wants to create his own version of the Stasi, East German secret police. Liberty Victoria President Julian Burnside has raised concerns that government workers authorized to make arrests may not be able to accurately determine whether someone poses a risk of spreading COVID-19. This is going to be great. So just think of people that have grudges in their life, like people that have been slighted, people that have been bullied, and they're empowering these people to make these kinds of arrests. Good luck with that. The bill introduces a preventative detention regime, which appears to have little protections or oversight and provides far too much discretion to people who may lack the necessary expertise. Of course, Victoria's state of emergency disaster powers extend until October 11th, give police the power to detain someone for a period reasonably necessary to eliminate or reduce a serious health risk to public health. They have the fewest cases, right? And they're saying that the reason why their caseload is so low is because the measures are so extreme. And I've even seen people here in the States vouch for Australia and think that we should adopt Australia's measures here in the States. I've read people who have advocated that public health or people who are kind of in the psychological, psychiatric fields. It's like, you got to be kidding me. No, I'm not. Police officers can also search people's homes without a warrant and restrict movement between locations, such as between regional Victoria and Melbourne. In their letter, a group of retired judges and prominent QCs were deeply concerned. He doesn't give a shit. Allowing citizens to make arrests on the basis of a belief that a detained person is unlikely to comply with emergency directions is unprecedented, excessive, and open to abuse. You better damn right it's open to abuse. Union leaders could be appointed to unleash retribution to small business owners who speak out against lockdowns. There you go. Labor Party officials could be appointed to intimidate political opponents. I stand with Dan types could be appointed to spy on their friends and neighbors. Of course, people will congregate to those who are in power because they want to curry favor. And this is all an experiment. This is all a human experiment. There you go, Australia. There you go. There's your finest. Conscience has been eliminated completely. So this is people who are trying to get over the wall. In terms of recruitment, process oversight, all that can be managed. Mr. Ernst in Tuesday response to the lawyer's letters. In terms of the first point, though the notion is unprecedented, yes, because we're in a 1 in 100 year event. This is not in any way business as usual. He's making and creating the disaster himself. He is the point of disaster, right? He is creating the contagion himself. Mr. Andrews justified the new law by saying it would help keep case numbers low, even though no other state in Australia has required such a drastic measure. They're using Australia as an open air laboratory, and I'm going to show you how and why. We jealously guard the low case numbers that we are in the process of delivering. Then you need to have a bigger enforcement team, he said. Victoria's Attorney General, Jill Hennessy, said the laws would allow us to continue responding to the challenges of the pandemic. So she's in favor of all of this. The Labor government has a majority in the lower house, but needs support of the cross bench to get the bill through the upper house. I have no idea how Australian politics works, but I know fascism when I see it. So these are all the judges, apparently, that have decided that they're not in favor of this. Jasper's wagging his tail. That's a good sign. There he is. This is the face of Big Brother right here. This is the face of Big Brother. Looks like he dyes his hair black. This guy apparently is not in favor of it. We're going to skip him. Some 62% say they were satisfied with his performance, even though the virus escaped from hotel quarantine in late May, caused a deadly. There's no way that they can actually prove any of that, right? You go down, you drill down into the numbers and look at the probables, the possibles, the false positives. Not there. Just not there. The September net score was up 20%, blah, 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 blah. Mr. Andrews encouraged anyone with a scratchy throat, runny nose, or headache. You had a headache? Go get tested. So there's your Melbourne residents on Saturday. Yep. They're having a decent time of it, aren't they? What do the comments have to say? Dan is quite famous in China now. Friends, family told from China. Also, articles paid by someone for advertising fees praising and flooding Chinese social media, WeChat. So Chinese in Australia were brainwashed into supporting him. Not surprised so many Aussies phones install TikTok. Also could be Huawei phones. They are constantly seeing brainwash articles over their phones. Makes you worry. China's long history of brainwashing campaign has landed here to change this country. Unbelievable. This can happen in Australia. Copied from the CCP. If nothing else, it serves as a warning. What the ALP will do now, empower the silence from Albanese is deafening. Scott Morrison needs to seriously rein this guy in. He will not. He will not. Here we go. Have you read this Constitution? ScoMo can't do anything, just like what we have in the States now. Balkanization. Scott Morrison will be the good cop to Dan Andrews' bad cop. He can't do anything. Okay, I was willing to give Dan Andrews the benefit of the doubt, but this is just egregious power grab. No other state has called for anything close to this. Enough with ridiculous fear-mongering. So people are pretty much on board here. Why aren't any law experts commenting on this article? Every Australian citizen have the right under our Constitution. That's probably been suspended. Wow. And we hypnotically complain about China when this disgusting premier is wanting to turn the local population against themselves. Surely this is not real. Could it be Victoria's premiers be controlled by you-know-who? And on and on. People are on to this. In any other job, Dr. Andrews would be standing for industrial murder charges. This criminal has no right to impose further dictates. Yeah, right. Go away. Well, there we go. Disgusting Dan. So we have, and maybe a 67% approval rate, theoretically. Well, there's your Nicola Sturgeon. We've reached a perilous turning point. Let's see. Now there's Dominic Raab, who is this guy's second in command. Second lockdown can't be ruled out. There you go. We're going to have a cute Kate Middleton pick in there. So we're seeing the Five Eyes countries all respond accordingly in kind. Now, you may think that this guy and what he's doing and what he's engaged in is based on Chinese propaganda, Chinese psychology, Chinese torture tactics, right? Well, I'm going to show you that the roots of this actually go all the way back to Australia. Okay. So in order to do that, we have to retrace a few things. What is really going on in Australia? What we're watching is a full-scale experiment. It's an experiment. It is a way to determine how people will respond in certain situations, right? And Dan Andrews is conducting the experiment. Now, of course, they want people to comply, but every time now they change the parameters or the variables. Now we have a new variable that's entered into the experiment, which is people being able to arrest other people. Where have we seen that before? Well, many of you have heard of the Stanford Prison Experiment, and I'm going to show you it's not the only experiment. I'm going to show you another experiment. I'm going to show you theoretically the grandfather of all of this, who happens to be Australian, by the way. Okay, so let's just do a quick trip down the old rabbit hole here. And let me get to the right. Here, let's do this. Because I clicked a few things, and let me do this. Okay. So what's interesting about the Stanford Prison Experiment is that it existed, right? It existed. It existed. It was a thing. And now they're trying to debunk the Stanford Prison Experiment, which is quite interesting. They made a movie out of it, 2015. Billy Crudup was in it, and there are a number of websites that are dedicated to the Stanford Prison Experiment. So I'm going to show you the wiki page, and then I'm going to show you a few other examples. Well, at least one other example. And I'm going to show you who the grandfather of all this stuff is. All right, so let's jump into the Stanford Prison Experiment. Now, it was conducted by Dr. Philip Zimbardo. This was in 1971. And they've got a plaque there to commemorate this thing. So I'm just going to jump in into the first paragraph. The Stanford Prison Experiment was a social psychology experiment that attempted to investigate the psychological effects of perceived power, focusing on the struggle between prisoners and prison officers. It was conducted at Stanford University. Remember now, Stanford is Langley West, on the days of August 14, 20, 1971, by a research group led by psychology professor Philip Zimbardo using college students. In the study, volunteers were assigned to be either guards or prisoners by the flip of a coin. In a mock prison with Zimbardo himself serving as the superintendent, several prisoners left mid-experiment, and the whole experiment was abandoned after 6 days. Early reports on experimental results claim the students quickly embraced their assigned roles, with some guards enforcing authoritarian measures and ultimately subjecting some prisoners to psychological torture, while many prisoners passively accepted psychological abuse and, by the officer's request, actively harassed other prisoners who tried to stop it. The experiment has been described in many introductory social psychology textbooks, although some have chosen to exclude it because its methodology is sometimes questioned. The U.S. Office of Naval Research funded the experiment as an investigation into the causes of difficulties between guards and prisoners in the United States Navy and United States Marine Corps. Certain portions of it were filmed, and excerpts of footage are publicly available. Some of the experiment's findings have been called into question. The experiment has been criticized for unscientific methodology and possible fraud, although Zimbardo interpreted the experiment as having shown that the prison guards instinctively embrace sadistic and authoritarian behaviors. Zimbardo actually instructed the guards to exert psychological control over the prisoners. Well, this is what Dan Andrews is doing. He's saying that you can exert psychological control over the other citizens who, for all intents and purposes, are the prisoners, right? Critics also noted that some of the participants behaved in a way that would help the study, so that, as one guard later put it, the researchers would have something to work with. Okay, that could be true. So let's again move that forward, put that into the context of Dan Andrews' little experiment. It would not be out of the question that some of the so-called citizens would not just be so-called citizens, either on the prisoner side or on the on the guard side, that they could actually be embedded into the whole thing, and they could be videotaped, and they could actually be used as an accelerant, right? That would be right out of the Stanford Prison Experiment. So variants of the experiment have been performed by other researchers, but none of these attempts have replicated the results of the SPE. That is not entirely true. So Zimbardo's goals: we wanted to see what the psychological effects were of becoming a prisoner or a prison guard. To do this, we decided to set up a simulated prison and then carefully note the effects of this institution on the behavior of all those within its walls. Okay, experimental method. Male participants were recruited and told they would participate in a 2-week prison simulation. These are men. The team selected 24 applicants whose test results predicted that they would be the most psychologically stable and healthy. That's what they say. These participants were predominantly white and or middle class. The group was intentionally selected to exclude those with criminal backgrounds, psychological impairments, or medical problems. They all agreed to participate in the 7 to 14-day period and receive $15 per day, which was about $95, maybe $100 in 2020 money, 2020 funny money. So the experiment was conducted in a 35-foot section of a basement, Jordan Hall, Stanford Psychology Building. The prison had 2 fabricated walls and one at the cell block wall for observation. 12 of the 24 participants, 12 an interesting number, right, were assigned the role of prisoner, 9 plus 3 potential substitutes, while the other 12 were assigned the role of guard, 9 plus 3 potential substitutes. 9 is the number of players on the field in baseball, right? You have 9 players per team, baseball, of course, being a Masonic sport, the most Masonic of the professional sports. The prisoners were arrested at their homes and charged with armed robbery. The local Palo Alto Police Department assisted Zimbardo with the simulated arrests and conducted full booking procedures on the prisoners, which included fingerprinting and the taking of mugshots. So they're blending reality here, right? I mean, you have these people who are presented as authority figures who are actually in on the experiment. The prisoners were transported to the mock prison from the police station where they were strip searched and given new identities. This shit is evil. This is evil shit. Right? So by day 2, things go off the rails. Guards had different responses to the new roles. One described by Stanford Magazine as the most abusive guard felt his aggressive behavior was helping experimenters get what they wanted. Another who had joined the experiment hoping to be selected as a prisoner instead recalls, I brought joints with me, and every day I wanted to give them to the prisoners. I looked at their faces and saw how they were getting dispirited and felt sorry for them. Warden David Jaffe intervened to change the guards' behavior, encouraging them to participate more and become more tough. This is amazing. This is amazing. And it goes on and on. And after only 35 hours, one prisoner began to act crazy, as Zimbardo described. This is hashtag 8612. 8612. Where do we see that? 8612. 8612. Oh. That's okay. That's interesting. I used to know a guy who was in the Dead Kennedys for a while. And that was his name. That was his name, 8612. That's where I heard that before. Interesting. I never made that connection. I actually met that guy. He was a member of the Dead Kennedys for a brief period of time. It's interesting. Then began to act crazy, to scream, to curse, to go into rage. That seemed out of control. It took quite a while. People became convinced that he was really suffering and we had to release him. Guards forced the prisoners to repeat their assigned numbers because they don't want you to relate to your prior identity. To reinforce the idea that this was their new identity, guards soon used these prisoner counts to harass prisoners using physical punishment, such as protracted exercise for errors in the prisoner count. Sanitary conditions declined rapidly, exacerbated by guards' refusals to allow some prisoners to urinate or defecate anywhere but in a bucket in their cell. As punishment, the guards would not let prisoners empty the sanitation bucket. Mattresses were a valued item in the prison, so the guards would punish prisoners by removing their mattresses, leaving them to sleep on concrete. Some prisoners were forced to be naked as a method of degradation. Several guards became increasingly cruel as the experiment continued. Experimenters reported that approximately 1/3 of the guards exhibited genuine sadistic tendencies. Most of the guards were upset when the experiment was halted after only 6 days. They were like, yeah, this is great. Man. Prisoner number 416, a newly admitted standby prisoner, expressed concern about the treatment of other prisoners. The guards responded with more abuse. When he refused to eat his sausages, saying he was on a hunger strike, guards confined him to solitary confinement, a dark closet. The guards instructed other prisoners to repeatedly punch the door while shouting at 416. The guard said he would be released from solitary confinement only if the prisoners gave up their blankets and slept on their bare mattresses, which all but one refused to do. Zimbardo boarded the experiment early when Christina Mayslock, a graduate student whom he was dating and later married, objected to the conditions of the prison. After she was introduced to the experiment to conduct interviews, Zimbardo noted that of more than 50 people who had observed the experiment, Maslach was the only one who questioned its morality. After only 6 days, a planned 2 weeks duration experiment was discontinued. What's she all about? She's an Aquarian. Interesting. Still alive. She'd be an interesting person to interview. Interesting. So this is all about industrial psychology, occupational psychology, industrial occupational dynamics, right? Now, this wasn't the only experiment that had taken place. So we have comparisons to Abu Ghraib. There was a BBC prison study. Of course, there's Milgram. The one story that does not get as much play as the Stanford Prison Experiment is there was an experiment called the Third Wave. And I'm going to show this to you guys. This was totally bizarre. This was at a high school. This is in 1967. And I think Zimbardo might have gotten some leads from this. So this was at a high school in Southern California. And there's a high school history teacher, Ron Jones. And he ran this experiment to explain how the German population could accept the actions of the Nazi regime during World War II. While he taught his students about Nazi Germany during his contemporary world history class, Jones found it difficult to explain how the German people could accept the actions of the Nazis and decided to create a social movement as a demonstration of the appeal of fascism. Over the course of 5 days, Jones, a member of the SDS Cubberley, this is Bay Area. Cubberley High School's in the Bay Area. Palo Alto, my bad. So this is in the backyard of Stanford. So this guy was a member of SDS, Students for Democratic Society, right? And SDS was ultimately, in fact, in 1968, was supplanted by the Weather Underground as the new guard to take on the totalitarian regime of the United States. So Cubberley High is in Palo Alto. My bad. I thought it was Southern California. Right in the backyard of Stanford. So this guy, a member of SDS, conducted a series of exercises in his classroom emphasizing discipline and community, intended to model certain characteristics of the Nazi movement. As the movement grew outside his class and began to number in the hundreds, Jones began to feel that the movement had spiraled out of control. He convinced the students to attend a rally where he claimed the classroom project was part of a nationwide movement and that the announcement of a third wave presidential candidate would be televised. Upon their arrival, students were presented with a blank channel. Jones told his students of the true nature of the movement as an experiment in fascism and presented them to a short film discussing the actions of Nazi Germany. So again, we can see that the roots of the Stanford Prison Experiment, are at a high school right in its own backyard. My bad. I thought it was SoCal. It's Cubberley. Wow. And so you can see what goes on here. By the third day, the experiment took on a life of its own with students from all over the school joining in. It went beyond the classroom. Some students who did not take history class but had a free period decided to join the class. On the third day, the class expanded from 30 students to 43 attendees. All the students showed drastic improvement in their academic skills and tremendous motivation. All the students were issued a member card, and each of them received a special assignment, like designing a third wave banner, stopping non-members from entering the class, or the like. Jones instructed the students on how to initiate new members. By the end of the day, the movement had over 200 participants. Jones was surprised as some of the students started reporting to him when others, members of the movement, fail to abide by the rules. There we go. It is in human nature, essentially, to acquiesce to power and curry favor for power. On the fourth day of the experiment, Jones decided to terminate the movement because it was slipping out of his control. The students became increasingly involved in the project, and their discipline and loyalty to the project was outstanding. He announced to the participants that his movement was part of a nationwide movement. The next day, President Kennedy, the third wave, publicly announced its existence. Jones ordered students to attend a nude rally on Friday, the fifth and last day. Right? He then played them in film. So supposedly, it was over. So this is a really interesting and bizarre note in human history, in the history of human behavior, run by a guy who is a member of SDS and right in the backyard of Stanford. And there's a documentary in October 10th of 2010. The documentary Lesson Plan retold the story of the third wave through interviews with the original students and teacher at the Mill Valley Film Festival. The events of the experiment were adapted in 1981 as a US TV special, The Wave, formed the basis of the young adult novelization of the same name by Todd Strasser, who conducted the story of the third wave into a modern time period, who used the pen name Morton Rue in Europe. It Can't Happen Here, the 86th book in the Sweet Valley Twins series, features a substitute teacher who conducts an experiment in a very similar nature. So there was a musical. Jones staged a musical called The Wave with some of the students in the class who were participants. This is crazy. Crazy shit. Crazy shit. Right? Third wave experiment, precursor to the Stanford Prison Experiment, right in its own backyard. Right in its own backyard. And this Ron Jones guy is still around, by the way. Now, there's an interesting character here that plays a role in all of this. And guess what? He's Australian. So let me introduce you to this fellow. His name is Elton Mayo. Perhaps if you're Australian, you might be familiar with him, or if you're engaged in the world of what they would call human behavior, organizational industrial psychology, you might be familiar with him. If you're not, let me introduce you to him. So, he was born December 26th in 1880. Think about that. And he died on September 7th, 1949. And he was an Australian-born psychologist, industrial teacher, and organizational theorist. Mayo was trained formally at the University of Adelaide, requiring a Bachelor of Arts with first-class honors, majoring in philosophy and psychology. So he's probably a first-wave Freudian. While in Queensland, Mayo served on the university's War Committee and pioneered research into the psychoanalytic treatment of shell shock. As a psychologist, Mayo helped soldiers returning from World War I recover from the stresses of war with the Brisbane physician, pioneered the psychoanalytic treatment of shell shock, and conducted psychopathological tests. He was a lecturer in psychology and mental philosophy at the UQ between 1911 and 1922. Very interesting years. When he sailed to the United States in 1926, he was appointed to the Harvard Business School as a professor of industrial research. Right there. Here comes Philadelphia again. We're back to Philadelphia. Right? Philadelphia experiment. David Rittenhouse, Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, he conducted research at a textile plant in order to develop a method to reduce the very high rate of turnover in the plant. Now, I want to bring something up here, which is important so like a little side note, right? When the Industrial Revolution happened, when they started to create factories Men did not want to be employed in factories. They didn't want to be employed in factories. And in fact, the early factory workers were women and children. Men wanted to be on the farm, or they wanted to be, doing their thing by themselves. They didn't want to be put into factories. They didn't want that. So we create industrialization, and the early workers in industrialization were women and children. So there's a high turnover rate. Well, why was there a high turnover? Because they fucking didn't like it. That's why. So now they hire Elton Mayo to conduct experiments inside of factories to figure out why people leave their jobs. So here it goes. So it was called the Hawthorne Studies. Okay. So the Hawthorne Studies has to do with the application of light. No, I don't want to donate because you do not allow me to edit pages. The Hawthorne Effect is supposed to refer to a type of reactivity in which individuals modify an aspect of their behavior in response to their awareness of being observed. But it has to do with light. Right? It's a light thing. But the light thing also had to do with being observed. Well, check this out. Descriptions of the well-known and remarkable effect, which was discovered in the context of research conducted at the Hawthorne Western plant, turned out to be fictional. Oh, it's always fictional, right? Always fictional. The research involved workers who made electrical relays at the Hawthorne Works, a Western electric plant in Cicero between 1924 and 1927. The famous lighting study was conducted. Workers experienced a series of lighting changes, so they're gaslighting them, in which productivity was said to increase with almost any change in the lighting. This turned out, again, not to be true. In the study that was associated with Elton Mayo, which ran from 1920 to 1932, a series of changes in work structure were implemented in a group of 5 women. 5 women. You see that? It wasn't men, it was women working. But this was the methodologically poor, uncontrolled study that did not permit any firm conclusions to be drawn. Okay, so look at the language here. It is not fiction. It actually happened. It actually happened. But it was an uncontrolled study. So by theoretically it being an uncontrolled study, it's not true. Just like they're redefining the Stanford Prison Experiment. Oh, that didn't happen because they introduced variables into the study that didn't make it fair. It's a way of somehow invalidating the thing, right? The term Hawthorne Effect was coined in 1958 by Henry Landsberger when he was analyzing the Hawthorne Studies conducted between 1924 and 32. The Hawthorne Works had commissioned a study to determine if workers would become more productive in higher or lower levels of light. The workers' productivity seemed to improve when changes were made and slumped when the study ended. It was suggested that productivity gain occurred as a result of motivational effect on the workers of the interest being shown in them. Okay, so Landsberger created his own experiment, right? The effect was observed for minute increases in illumination. And these lighting studies, light intensity, was altered to examine its effect on worker productivity. Most industrial occupational psychology and organizational behavior textbooks refer to the illumination studies. Only occasionally are the rest of the studies mentioned. Although illumination research of workplace lighting formed the basis of the Hawthorne Effect, other changes such as maintaining clean workstations, clearing floors of obstacles, and even relocating workstations resulted in increased productivity for short periods. Thus, the term is used to identify any type of short-lived increase in productivity. So this is what was going on in the early 20th century, mid 20th century. They were trying to figure out how to motivate or demotivate people. And part of this had to do with being monitored, right? Monitoring was a big part of this. So they were given 2 5-minute breaks. Productivity increased, but when they received 6 5-minute rests, they disliked it and reduced output. Provided food during the break, shortened the day by 30 minutes. Output went up, shortened it more. Output per 1 hour went up, but overall output decreased. Returning first. So they're just trying to tweak people and basically turn them into widgets and get the most productivity out of them. But the thing here that really, again, it's about observation. Observation, right? The purpose, so they had bank wiring room experiments. The purpose of the next study was to find out how payment incentives would affect productivity. The surprising result was that productivity actually decreased. Workers apparently had become suspicious that their productivity may have been boosted to justify firing some of the workers later on. The study was conducted by Elton Mayo, there he is again, and W. Lloyd Warner between 1931 and 32 on a group of 14 men who put together telephone switching equipment. The researchers found that although the workers were paid according to individual productivity, productivity decreased because the men were afraid that the company would lower the base rate. Detailed observation of the men revealed the existence of informal groups or cliques within the formal groups. These cliques develop informal rules of behavior as well, such as mechanisms to enforce them. These cliques serve to control group members and to manage bosses when bosses ask questions. Clique members gave the same responses, even if they were untrue. These results show that workers were more responsive to the social force of their peer group than to the control incentives of management. You think Dan Andrews is paying attention to these experiments? Of course. Richard Nesbitt Hawthorne described Hawthorne as a glorified anecdote. J.G. Adair warned of the gross factual inaccuracy in most secondary publications. He argued it should be viewed as a variant of Orn's 1973 experiment, demand effect. Mayo contended that the effect was due to the workers reacting to the sympathy and interest of the observers. That's important right there. Right there. He did discuss the study as demonstrating an experimental effect, but as a management effect, how management can make workers perform differently because they feel differently. He suggested that much of the Hawthorne effect concerned workers feeling free and in control as a group rather than as being supervised. The experimental manipulations were important, convincing the workers to feel this way, that conditions in the special 5-person work group were really different from the conditions on the shop floor. The study was repeated with similar effects on the mica splitting workers. So it was this idea that they were being observed, which changed the nature of the experiment, right? The secondary observer effect. Despite the observer effect as popularized in the Hawthorne experiments, hold on. Perhaps falsely identified, the popularity, plausibility of the observer effect in theory has led researchers to postulate that this effect could take place at a second level. Thus, has been proposed that there was a secondary observer effect when researchers working with secondary data, such as survey data or various indicators, may impact the results of their scientific research. Now we're into Heisenberg. And how the observer actually affects the experiment. It's interesting stuff here, right? Very interesting stuff. Although little attention has been paid to this phenomena, the scientific implications are very large. Evidence of this effect may be seen in recent studies that assign a problem to a number of researchers or research teams who then work independently using the same data to try to find a solution. This is a process called crowdsourcing data analysis. It was used in a groundbreaking study by Solberzen, Raphael, Eric Ullman, Dan Martin, and Brian Nosek. That was in 2015 about red cards and player race in football, soccer. So this stuff, these industrial and organizational dynamics are deep, and they go on and on and on, right? And this is the guy right there, Australia. There is your lead experimenter. There is the head of your social laboratory. Um, Mayo has been credited with making significant contributions to a number of disciplines, including business management, industrial sociology, philosophy, and social psychology. His field, research, and industry had a significant impact on industrial and organizational psychology. According to Traher, Mayo is known for his having established in scientific study of what today is called organizational behavior, when he gave close attention to the human, social, and political problems of industrial civilization. Mayo's work helped to lay the foundation of the human relations movement. So when you have somebody inside of an organization or corporation and they're head of HR, this is the work of Elton Mayo. He emphasized that alongside formal organization and industrial workplace, there exists an informal organizational structure as well. Mayo recognized the inadequacies of using existing and scientific management approaches to industrial organizations and underlined the importance of relationships among people who work for such organizations. His ideas on group relations were advanced in his 1933 book, The Human Problems of an Industrial Civilization, which was based partly on his Hawthorne research. Okay, here's your guy right here. Here's your guy. You can get into all the case studies, right? You can get into who influenced him. Fritz J. Roethlisberger, Mayo's graduate assistant, William J. Dixon, head of Department of Relations, Western Electric, conducted the bulk of the research in the plant in Cicero. So it was his pupils who continued to work with this thing called the Hawthorne Effect. So Mayo concluded that people's work performance is dependent upon both social relationships and job content. He suggested a tension between workers' logic of sentiment and managers' logic of cost and efficiency could lead to conflict within organizations. Parsons, however, showed that the Hawthorne studies, which were not really experiments, were too confounded to enable research to draw firm conclusions. The qualitative aspects of the research suggested that norms of cooperation among workers were related to productivity. Okay, so essentially what we're talking about here is that one researcher will say if you incentivize people, right, if you incentivize people, their productivity will go up. Another group says that the incentivizing doesn't really work. And that what happens when people are incentivized is that they're afraid that if they have more incentive, that their base pay will be reduced, so that there's a whole kind of issue of trust involved here. Now, again, we're looking at this idea of UBI, universal basic income, which de-incentivizes people. It de-incentivizes people. And that's a part of the experiment. Now, again, we're talking about, industrial relations, organizational development, and Mr. Elton Mayo, the father of it all, was born and educated in Australia. Okay, so Australia, Melbourne, you are not just in the throes of a fascist police state. You are in the midst of a major social experiment. This is what's going on now. And Dan Andrews is introducing new variables. And he's bringing in things like the Stanford Prison Experiment, third wave psychology, third, and watch now. Watch what happens if this goes through. Watch how people who will essentially be appointed and draft other people to be part of a group who will be empowered to arrest and detain other citizens. Watch what happens. They'll form their own group. They'll form their own party. They may wind up dressing the same. They may have their own uniforms. This bears attention. It bears attention. And, it's still amazing to me that in terms of human rights, there's nobody talking about this. Nobody talking about this. Anybody who is supposedly involved in, furthering human rights is completely and utterly silent. And, somebody like Bono, who's supposed to champion human rights, anybody who's supposedly in the human rights camp, you should be taking up your cause with Australia. But they won't. They won't. because they're going to keep their mouth shut. They're on the payroll, right? They're on the payroll. Human rights only exist for certain people in the grand global experiment at this point in time, because apparently other rights to other people are not afforded. So here we are, the great moment of cognitive dissonance, where we're watching this take place, and people are pulling their hair out. They're pulling their hair out. And how can one place, like I'll give you an example. Went out to dinner last night. One place, masked Nazis. Other place, not a problem. Same town, not this town, right? So again, it creates a huge, huge issue for cognitive dissonance. And again, when you get into cognitive dissonance, it just splits people right in two, because it's an unsolvable equation. Well, why can this be true and this not be true? And even the idea that when you enter a restaurant and you have to put a mask on to get from the door to a table, that somehow magically, when you're at the table, the so-called coronavirus really, really won't spread between, the 6 foot limit. Just completely and utterly absurd. Utterly absurd. Just completely absurd. What does that lead to? More cognitive dissonance. What does that lead to? More split, more micronization, more fractionalization, the balkanization of the individual. Just like we're seeing the balkanization of the US right now. You're seeing the balkanization of Australia. Hello, welcome to Gemini. All right, what do we have here? Just like the environmental bowel movement. Oh, that's funny, Steve. I used to run 10Ks many times through the Genesee Valley Park along the canal. Let's see. Every production environment worked in quotas set to inhuman standards. No incentive ever earned, just forced to work as fast as possible. Well, they're changing the experiment all the time. If they found out that incentivizing people doesn't increase productivity, then why should they? Why should they incentivize people? Right? Another experiment is Amazon. Like, Amazon is an experiment in the workplace. And what Jeff Bezos has done is basically taken, Ayn Rand's principles and applied them in Amazon. And basically, it's like social Darwinism inside of Amazon. So if you're inside of Amazon, they teach you to be a shark. They teach you to be predatory inside of Amazon, because they want that. They want predatory behavior, because they believe that predatory behavior will bring the best out in people. That'll bring the highest degree of competitiveness. And when they have that, people will try to accelerate their performance. So that's another brand of organizational dynamics and psychology. Go look up some of the videos of people that have worked at Amazon. It's not for the faint of heart. And I'm not even talking about the warehouse. I'm talking about inside Amazon headquarters. Let's see. That's interesting. Walmart discontinued quarterly performance bonuses this past week because they claim people prefer to be higher wage over a bonus. People don't trust the bonus. People want security. Ultimately, what are they learning from that? People want, instead of getting a big bucket of hay, they want to make sure that their daily bucket of hay is a little bit bigger, right? Adam Curry told Joe Rogan UBI is definitely on its way. Well, if Adam Curry says it, then it must be true. Adam Curry, by the way, has not denied he is from a military background family, grew up in Arlington, Virginia. So Adam Curry is basically the scion of American intelligence, American military intelligence. So if Adam Curry says it's coming, well, then it must be true. Let's see. What else do we have here? University of Rochester's. All the professors are Jewish. Well, seems like that's probably not just the only university that's heavily predominated by people of a certain religious or ethnic or fill in the blank persuasion, academia in the university setting is heavily populated by Jewish professors. And I'm not stating anything that is anti-Semitic. It's true. It's true. Just look at the numbers, right? Look at the numbers. It's a group of people that have gravitated toward the university setting. Bottom line. So whether it's all or good percentage, right? I don't have the figures for Rochester, but it's part of academia, the academic landscape in 2020. Let's see, anybody else? I've seen similar protocol introduced into a warehouse of 500 guys, Teamsters at Wegmans, Rochester, New York. It works. People comply. Yeah. Let's see. We need some support soon where people will think we're nuts. Well, that's the plan, isn't it? Uniforms influence the wearer's self-esteem. Absolutely. And they've actually proven this in situations where, like, there's a good side of that and there's a bad side of that. All right. So the good side of that is they took kids who were, let's just say wearing their jeans, about 3 inches below their navel, right? Both male and female. And they took those kids and they put them in a situation like a Catholic school or an academy, and they all had to wear the same outfit, right? They all had to wear the same outfit. Well, guess what happened? Their performance went up. So is that a bad thing? Is that really a bad thing? I don't know. To me, that's probably a good thing. If their performance went up, if they actually got interested in their studies, maybe it kept them off the street, not a bad thing. On the other hand, there could be the flip side of that, where when you give people uniforms, now they become empowered to do things that they would not normally do. So that's the shadow side of it. I remember as a kid, my father would drive me to school. And I lived in one town and I would go to school in another town. This is like from first through third grade. And in the morning, we would pass a Catholic school. And the kids would always be wearing the same thing. And their outfit was a white shirt. And the boys wore these kind of gray, wasn't flannel, but kind of the fleecy gray slacks. And they wore a green sweater. That was their uniform. And the girls wore a white shirt, the green sweater, and they wore skirts, which were plaid. And I saw them every day. And I've thought to myself, please don't send me to that school. Please don't send me to that school. The school is called St. Dunstan's. I was terrified of being sent to St. Dunstan's because I did not want to wear the same fucking thing every day. But I can understand why it would help. I was the kid that loved the Cub Scouts but hated the uniform. Let's see, what else do we have? The uniform effect was neutralized in that school setting. That's why the scores improved. That's right. Yeah. Most people are averse to responsibility, relieved when told what to do. Absolutely. 100%, Steve. 100%. Let's throw that up there. That's a comment we need to throw up there. Robert, I'm supposed to be mashing right now. Oh, geez. Sorry, Emily. A little carried away. Okay, I guess I should be joining Emily. We have stuff to do. All right, let me get out of here. Thanks, everybody. Look, I don't want to bum you out, okay? But you got to know what's going on. You got to know what's going on. All right. You got to know what's going on. And clearly, we're in the midst of a major fucking experiment. It's a major experiment. And they're modeling behavior. They're changing the variables all the time, moving the goalposts. And Victoria, you are in the heart of the experiment. You're in it. You're in it. And they're getting ready to take you to another level. You're not an animal. You're not a number. You're a human. I guess an animal is better than being a number. You're a human. Remember that. Always remember that. Not only are you a human, but you're a spiritual being having a human experience. Never forget that. Never forget that. Remind yourself every day, at every turn, as much as possible. Okay? All right. I'll be back tomorrow. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart to step on what's possible. Here we go. Oh, by the way, the UN says that you should be wearing a mask for the next 5 years. Wrap your head around that. Have a great day. I got to go play Mash with Emily. Bye for now.